Okay, hello everyone. Okay, so the next program in chapter 4 is distance traveled. Okay, so the distance a vehicle travels can be calculated as follows. Distance is equal to speed times time. For example, if a train travels 40 miles per hour for 3 hours, the distance traveled is 120 miles. Write a program that asks the user for the speed of a vehicle in miles per hour and the number of hours it has traveled. It should then use a loop to display the distance the vehicle has traveled for each hour of that time period. Here's an example of the desired output. So what is the speed of the vehicle in miles per hour? The user enters 40. How many hours has it traveled? The user enters 3. Then it should basically display this format. Hour 1, the distance traveled is 40. Hour 2, the distance traveled is 80. Hour 3, the distance traveled is 120, and so on. So basically, the question is, the program should be designed in such a way that it's going to ask the user for the speed of the vehicle in miles per hour. Okay, basically, what's the speed of the vehicle traveling, and how many hours has it traveled, and you can basically know the distance with this formula. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. Okay, all right. So what we want to do is, first of all, it says write a program that is going to ask the user for the speed of a vehicle and the number of hours it has traveled. So let's do that. Let's first start with the speed of the vehicle. Let's first start with writing a program to ask the user for the speed of the vehicle, right? So to do that, let's use the input function. And the input function is going to basically display what we're about to type to the user and allow the user to type in a response. So we want to go ahead and ask the user to enter the speed of the vehicle, right? So what is the speed of a vehicle? Okay. Now the user is going to type in something. The input function by default returns a string every time. Okay, even if the user types in over here the speed, which is, let's say 40 miles per hour, okay, 40. The input function by default is going to return that 40 as a string. Now, we can't use strings in calculations in the way that we want to use it in this question. So we have to, first of all, convert that string that is being returned into, in this case, we want it to be a double. Okay, let's just convert it to a double because the distance traveled could be a decimal. The user can type in a decimal, let's say a float. So in this case, let's go ahead and convert it to a float. Actually, let's convert it to a float. Okay, it could be a floating point number like a decimal, 40 point something. So again, the input function always returns a string. So let's go ahead and convert whatever the user is typing or the user has typed into a float. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead. Well, first of all, the input function is going to accept what the user has typed and return it as a string. So we are calling the float function to convert everything that the user has typed, of which the input function is returning. Okay, we are converting everything the user has typed and everything the input function is returning, which is going to be everything the user has typed. We are converting it to a float. And once we convert it to a float, we need a place to store it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable. That's going to be the vehicle speed. So I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to call it vehicle speed. And vehicle speed is going to store what the user has typed over here, converted to a float. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and ask the user to enter how many hours it has traveled. Over here it says write a program that asks the user to enter ask the user for the speed of the vehicle. Okay, we've done that, and the number of hours it has traveled. So now we need to store the number of hours it has traveled too. So let's do the same thing. Okay, for the number of hours. Okay, we know the number of hours is, let's say, it can be an integer, but again, the user can type in 2.5 hours. Okay, 2 hours 30 minutes. So let's leave that also as a float. Let's change the string. I'm going to paste it. Let's change the string to how many hours has it traveled? So how many hours has it traveled? I'll put a colon here too. And then we're going to convert the hours to a float and then store it in a variable. Let's say time traveled. right? Let's see. So, and the hours it has traveled. So let's say, time. So time traveled. So vehicle speed and then time traveled will be stored in their respective variables, right? Now the question says the program should then use a loop to display the distance the vehicle has traveled for each hour of that time period. Okay, so if the user enters, let's say, 3 hours for hours or the time traveled, and then 40 miles per hour for the speed the vehicle is moving in. For the first hour, we know to calculate the distance is the speed times the time. The time is going to be the first hour, and the speed is going to be 40 miles because the vehicle is moving at 40 miles. For the second hour, we're going to multiply we're going to multiply basically the speed 40 miles times 2, which is the second hour, and that's going to be the distance for the second hour. Okay, the distance for the third hour is going to be the speed times 3, which is going to be the third hour. So speed times the third hour, which is going to give us the distance for the third hour. So we know that, the question says that we should display, over here, it says we should display the distance the vehicle has traveled for each hour of that time period. So starting from 1, we are starting from the first hour to the last hour. If the user types in 10 hours, we are starting from what's the distance traveled in the first hour, the second hour, the third hour, all the way to the 10th hour. Each hour that the car or the vehicle has traveled, we want to display the distance, just like this. So we're going to create a loop starting from 1 all the way to the hours that the user typed. So if the user typed in 5 hours, we are going from 1 hour to 5 hours, and we're displaying the distance traveled for each hour. So hour 1, hour 2, hour 3, hour 4, hour 5, if the user typed in 5 hours. So we're going to create a for loop. Okay, so a for loop, so it's going to be a for loop. The target variable is going to be hour. Okay, for hour, okay, which is going to represent the current hour. Actually, I should name it current hour. Okay, for current hour in range. Okay, so I'm going to create a range. The range is going to basically start from 1 because we're starting from 1. So current hour initially is going to be 1, and we are going all the way to the time traveled. Okay, basically what the user typed in for time travel, but we have to add 1 to it. You know what? Let's see. So I guess this program is restricting the hours or the time traveled to just integers, right? I guess that's what this program is doing, because otherwise, if the user type let's say 2.5 plus 1, then it's going to basically it's still going to work. It's still going to work, but I'll leave it the same. I'll leave it as a float. It's fine. It's still going to work. All right. So because if the user types in, let's say, 2.5 hours, it's going to basically give the time for each hour of that 2.5 hours, I guess. But I guess the program over here is restricting it to integers. So I'll still leave it as a float, and it should still be fine. It should still work. A time traveled. So we're adding 1 to time traveled because if we don't add 1 to it, then the range, for example, if the user types in 5 for time traveled, we are starting from 1 all the way. If I don't add 1 to it, we are starting from 1 to 4. Time travel over here, this is the starting point or the starting value, and this is going to be the ending value, but it's not included. So if the user type in 5, and let's say I type in 5 here, I'm starting from 1 all the way to 4 now because 5 is not included. The upper limit is like a limit, but it's not included. It's like the upper limit but not included. So that means I'm moving from 1 to 4. Okay. Now if the user typed in 5 for time travel, I need to add 1 to it so that I cover that range. So in that case, I'm starting from 1, okay, to, this is going to result to 6. Okay, I'm starting from 1 to 5. 6 is not included. The upper limit is not included. So that's why I added 1 to time traveled. Okay, so we're starting from 1. If the user types in, let's say, 5, okay, in this case, it's going to be 5 plus 1. So we're starting from 1 to, not 6, but 5, because 6 over here is not included. It's like the upper limits, but not included. So For current hour in range 1 to time traveled plus 1, what we want to do is let's go ahead and calculate the distance traveled. Let's go ahead and create a variable, call it distance traveled, and display it. So distance traveled now is going to be, remember that we've been given the formula here. Okay, now the speed is going to be the speed that the person typed over here, vehicle speed. It's going to be vehicle speed, okay, times time. Now in this case, current hour is keeping track of each hour. It's keeping track of the time. Initially, when the loop runs the first time, it's going to be 1. When it runs the second time, it's going to be 2. When it runs the third time, it's going to be 3, all the way to whatever hour the user typed. So since it's keeping track of our hour, because we are multiplying 1 by 40 to give us the 40. We are multiplying 2 by 40 to give us the 80. 3 by 40 to give us 120, because the user entered 40 for the speed. So we are multiplying the 40, which is the speed, times the current hour, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever. So we are multiplying the vehicle speed times the current hour, which is going to be the current hour, basically, to give us the distance traveled for that current hour. And we want to display it. So we want to print the current hour. So if it's initially, it's going to be 1, and then we're going to display the current hour, right? And then the next thing we're going to display is, I'm going to go ahead and display a space, okay, and then the distance traveled. Oops, I was supposed to put it in quotations. So distance traveled, like this. Okay, so we are calculating the distance traveled by multiplying the vehicle speed by the current hour to give us the distance traveled for that current hour. We are printing the current hour, so if it's 1, and then we are displaying the distance traveled. If it iterates again, the current hour is going to increment, and then we're going to display the distance traveled for that current hour, okay, by multiplying the vehicle speed by that current hour to get the distance traveled over here, and so on and so forth. Now I want to go ahead and create this header on top of it. So I'm going to, before the loop over here, I'm going to create, I'll call the print function, which is going to print the header. I want to print out the string hour over here. Now over here, by default they are separated by a space, so I don't necessarily need it unless I need extra space. By default, all the arguments I pass into the print function, they are separated by a space. So this is going to print the current hour, space, the distance traveled. Because by default, the single argument you pass into the print function, they are separated by a space. Same with this one. I'm printing the hour over here, the header, how hour, maybe a couple of spaces, plus the distance traveled. I mean, the hour and then the distance traveled. So an hour, a space, and then the distance traveled text. By default, all the arguments that I pass into the print function are separated by a space. So the hour is going to be separated by a space, and then a distance traveled. So we will see how this displays, and then later on we'll make some modifications. So I'm going to go ahead and save this in where I save all the Python programs. Sorry, it's in the desktop. So Python, and I'll save this as distance traveled. No, it's small. It's a distance traveled.py, and I'll create a folder for it. Distance traveled. And I'll save it here. And let's see what happens. Okay, so what is the speed of a vehicle? I'm going to use exactly as this program. The speed, I'm going to type in 40. Hit enter. How many hours has it traveled? I'm going to enter 3. And I'm expecting this to display. So I'm going to hit enter. Well, first of all, I have a couple of errors. So let's see what happens. Float object cannot be interpreted as an integer. Okay. So it was what I was explaining above. Okay, so I think when you're trying to specify the range, the starting and ending points, they have to be integers, I guess. Maybe not necessarily, but that's what it's complaining about. So let's go ahead. Like I said, this program I think was restricting this to be for the hours to be integers. So in that case, then let's go ahead and convert this into the time traveled into an integer instead. Okay. Again, we are assuming this program is accepting integers for the hour. Okay, so we are converting this to an integer, and we know that the time travel now is going to be an integer, so it's not going to be a problem. So because it was expecting the ending limit to be an integer and not a float, and that's why I guess it was complaining. So I'm going to run this again and try it and see what happens. Speed, I'm going to enter 40. Hours, I'm going to enter 3 and hit enter. And now we can see that it's displaying exactly this. Okay, it's just not formatted well. So let's see if, I know in Java tabs work. Let's see if it works over here too. So I'm going to put a \t. Let's see if it works first before I explain. So I haven't tried it before. So I'm going to enter 40 and 3. And tabs work in Python as well. I didn't know that. I guess it's across all most programming languages. Okay, so let me do the same thing for this. And I'm going to pass in a tab as the other argument and run this and see what happens. Vehicle speed 40 and 3. Okay, so now it's displaying well. Probably put a space in between the questions and then the output. Okay, so what is happening is I just over here in the string itself I put a \t, and \t is a tab. It creates a tab. Okay, when the interpreter sees the \t, it creates a tab, before displaying what's after it. In this case, the distance travel. It creates a tab before the distance travel. So together the \t creates a tab. The same thing for this. I'm passing in a second argument to the print function, which is a tab. So it's going to display current by default. Okay, everything that is displayed, all the arguments that are displayed in the print function are separated with a space anyway. But the space wasn't enough, so I had to pass in a tab. So it's going to display a current hour space, a tab space, the distance traveled. Okay. All right. If you want, you can go ahead and change the default space, that is separating each argument in the print function by calling another argument which is called SEP, SEP. Wow, that was funny. SEP, okay, which stands for separator. So separator, I'm setting it to nothing. Okay, nothing, and it's going to basically not separate these arguments with a space, but over here we're going to see the tab effect. We're going to see it create a tab. If you want, you can do that, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to keep it like this. The other thing I wanted to do was create a space after it's done asking the questions. I wanted to create a space before the output. So I'm done asking the questions over here. I wanted to create a space before printing out the output. So I wanted to create a space here, a new line here. You can go ahead and call the print function this way. Now, when you call the print function and you type in something, I needed quotations, and you type in something like this and you run the program, you provide values for it, 40 and 3. Now, you can see that it printed what you told it to print, or what you asked it to print. It prints this, and then it takes, by default, the print function takes the cursor, to the next line. It takes the cursor to the next line. So anything that comes after what you've told it to print is displayed on the next line. You can see that. And if you wanted to create a new line, you can just call the print function without typing anything in it. So basically, you are telling it to print nothing. You're not telling it to print anything this time around. You're telling it to print nothing. See, by default, the print function takes the cursor to the next line. So you're telling it to print nothing. It's going to print nothing. But by default, the print function is going to take the cursor to the next line over here. So anything that comes after the print function, in this case, these, is going to be printed on the next line. Prints nothing, takes the cases to the next line. Anything that comes after the print function is displayed on the next line. So if I run this and I type in 40 and 3, I can see that I've created a new line here by calling this the print function, and basically the output. We could have also created, let's say, a new line over here, right over here. We could have typed the \n. So the \n is the new line character. So the \n together is the new line character. So if the interpreter sees the \n, it basically takes the kz to the next line. So anything that comes after this new line character is displayed on the next line. So when an interpreter sees this, it's going to take the kz to the next line, and anything that comes after this, okay, comes on that next line. Okay, so we could have done that too, but we've already called the print function here. It does the same thing for us. So yeah, let's try all the values and see. Vehicle speed, I'm still going to enter 40, but I'm going to type in 10 hours, and it should give us the distance traveled for each hour of the 10 hours. So I'm going to hit enter, and now we can see we have 10 hours, and it tells us the distance traveled for each of them. You can add units if you want. It's just a regular string you can attach to it. You can round these if you want. You can run them if you want, or format them if you want. In this case, I don't need them formatted. It looks okay, but you can if you want. So yeah, we're done. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please comment down below, and I'll do everything to respond to them. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time with the next program. All right, bye-bye.